Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. Sociopaths begin a relationship in hot pursuit, but later, when they've gotten what they want, they lose interest. This creates a power imbalance, which, for the target, can lead to a trauma bond. I'm Donna Andersen, author of Lovefraud.com, and tonight I'll explain power imbalances in relationships with sociopaths. At the end of my presentation, I'll answer your questions. To join the chat or ask a question, please subscribe to this channel. In sociology, there's a concept called the principle of the least interest. It's an idea that starts to explain the power imbalances in relationships with sociopaths. The theory was developed in 1938 by a sociologist named Willard Waller. He said that when one partner is emotionally invested in the relationship more than the other, the less involved partner has more power in the relationship. That less interested person can make demands on the more interested person, with the threat, either implicit or overt, that if the demands aren't met, the relationship will end. That's the basic idea. But it seems to me that when you're dealing with a sociopath, it can be more complicated. It's certainly possible in a normal relationship, meaning that neither partner is disordered, for one person to be more interested and more emotionally involved than the other. Sean M. Byrne, PhD, wrote a helpful article in Psychology Today called "When One Relationship Partner is More Interested." Now, as an example of this phenomenon, she described a situation in which the less interested partner wanted a polyamorous relationship, and the more interested partner went along with it because it was either that or nothing. Byrne noted that a relationship between a more interested and a less interested partner can last for a while. She explained that the less interested partner often doesn't want to give up the many benefits being delivered by the more interested partner. The less interested person rationalizes their behavior by emphasizing that they've been honest with their partner who has chosen to accept the relationship terms. Because the less interested partner stays and offers occasional hints of romance, the more interested partner remains hopeful. They give, they sacrifice, and they compromise themselves. But this is also their power. Their willingness to take what they can get, when they can get it, and their generosity makes it harder for the less interested partner to cut them loose. Byrne said that the more interested partner eventually feels taken advantage of, no surprise there, and also hurt, while the less interested partner may feel angry and resentful about being manipulated into staying. She advised that the right thing to do is to end the involvement so both parties are free to find better relationships. This, of course, is true. But if one party is a sociopath, he or she has no real interest in doing what is right. A sociopath's goal in entering a relationship is not love. It's to use the partner to gain something that they want. Now, it certainly doesn't look like that in the beginning. When the sociopath is in hot pursuit of a new relationship, he or she definitely appears to be the more interested party, calling and texting all the time, planning extravagant dates, showering the targeted partner with attention and affection. Unfortunately, sociopaths are really convincing. The target thinks it's love. In truth, as we know, it's love bombing. The sociopath's goal is to seduce and then use the target. He or she can keep the charade going as long as necessary to achieve this objective. Then, once the target is committed, the sociopath continues the relationship as long as he or she feels like it is delivering the benefit that they want. But the intensity diminishes. In fact, the target may now be subjected to criticism and abuse and lying and cheating. The sociopath shifts from the more interested partner to the less interested partner. And here's where things get complicated when considering the principle of the least interest in regards to sociopaths. Yes, there is a power imbalance because sociopaths are interested only as long as they are getting what they want. Then they become the less interested partner. But they also engage in intermittent good and bad treatment of the target. So the combination of the power imbalance with the intermittent good and bad treatment is a recipe for creating a trauma bond in the target. Therefore, even when the more interested parties realize that they aren't getting what they want from the relationship, they find it difficult to leave. In fact, they may become even more invested in trying to prove that the sociopath should stay in the relationship. The trauma bond gets in the way of detaching. Now, I explain this in a lot more detail in my webinar, which is called Maybe You're Not Codependent, You're Traumatized. If you feel like you're dealing with a power imbalance in your relationship, the webinar may help you to see what's going on and how it affects you so that you can plan your escape. It is important to get out as soon as you realize what's going on. With trauma bonds, the longer you stay, the harder it is to leave. There's a link to the webinar in the description box below the video. So that's the presentation for tonight. Next, I'll answer your questions. If you want in-depth advice for your own situation, I do offer personal consultations and a new service that I call Deep Emotional Release to help with your healing. There's a link in the description below the video. So if you have a question now, please be sure to subscribe so you can participate in the chat and ask your question. And of course, when you subscribe, you'll automatically be notified about all my new videos. And plus, you'll help to boost the distribution of Lovefraud Live, which means you're spreading the word about the dangerous sociopaths who live among us, and there are millions of them, unfortunately. Okay, looks like we have some questions here tonight. Okay, so Alicia says, watching these videos helps me make sense of a lot of what happened. As soon as we were married, all the emotion and affection went out the window. It was like living with a stranger. Yeah. And that is really typical of somebody who is dealing with a sociopath, who has married a sociopath. So then Alicia says, what I don't understand is why they stay or want you there when they seem to want no interaction or anything from you. What do they want? Well, if you're dealing with a sociopath, there's always some kind of reason why they stay. It's not out of love. Because sociopaths don't get involved with somebody for love. They get involved because of some kind of objective that they want to accomplish. Now, in some cases, and maybe in your case, the objective is to present a certain kind of image to the world, maybe to his family or to the community or to his boss or something like that. And lots of sociopaths can stay in relationships for a really long time just for that reason. The reason being that, you know, they like the image. And so that can be happening. It also could be that, now remember, when you're dealing with a sociopath, they're not all the same, and some are definitely worse than others. You know, some are, you know, out and out con artists or violent or, you know, physically abusive or something along those lines. And there are those who have some of the traits, but not all of them. And because of that, they can sometimes seem to be more normal, and they're actually the harder ones to spot. Those who have low to mid level of the traits, and keep in mind that the traits, for at least for psychopathy, or actually for all of these disorders, there is a list of traits or behaviors that they typically engage in, 20 of them in the case of psychopaths. And then any individual can have any one of those traits or behaviors to greater or lesser degrees. So you end up with this whole matrix of, you know, where somebody could be on the chart, and that's why they're not all the same, and that's why they can be very difficult to spot. And those at the low end or the low to mid-range can often pass for normal in a lot of situations, so they can be difficult to spot. And it could be that, you know, maybe the person has other issues. You know, maybe they just, you know, are not emotional or can't connect or something like that. So, you know, that's a possibility as well, that they just simply don't have the ability to have a full relationship. But that doesn't necessarily, if that's the only issue, it doesn't necessarily mean they're a sociopath. I mean, when someone's a sociopath, you do need to see, you know, a lot of different of the behaviors. Okay. All right, so Pulse Point says, can you possibly touch on insecure attachment styles as they relate to sociopathy? I ask because I originally thought he was dismissive avoidant, turned out to be much worse. There's a fair amount of debate in professional circles, meaning psychopathy researchers, and also on the clinical side, because there are like two different groups. There's the psychopathy researchers who are working in university and doing all these studies, you know, trying to identify behaviors and traits. And then there's the clinicians, the counselors, the therapists, the social workers who are actually dealing with people. And they definitely do not agree on these disorders, you know, how they're defined and what the criteria are. And you know, so that's the first layer of confusion. The next layer of confusion is that a lot of these researchers and professionals have the idea that sociopaths don't attach at all. They don't have, you know, any function of attachment. I mean, there's quite a few people who believe, especially psychopaths, that they simply make no connections and they never have any kind of attachments. Well, that's not necessarily true. They do have attachments, but they're not complete attachments. In other words, when it comes to love, as I've explained on these webinars, on these videos, multiple times, for romantic love, there's three components of romantic love. There's attachment, which is what we're talking about. There's sex, which is self-explanatory, and there's caregiving. And what that means is that if you really love somebody, You want what's best for them. You take care of them. You hope that they do well in life. You want them to be happy and healthy. Well, sociopaths, particularly antisocials and psychopaths, can do the first two. They can do attachment, and they can do sex. They love sex. Sex is great most of the time. They don't do caregiving. They do not have the ability to put somebody else before themselves. So consequently, they never really have a true love relationship. I mean, they may like hanging around with you. They may like the sex, but they're never going to really take care of you. If you've ever been around this person and gotten sick, you probably found that out the hard way. So, so there might not be a direct correlation between the particular attachment styles and sociopaths, because there's, like I said, a disagreement in the field about whether or not they attach at all. So that's probably about the best that I can explain it, is that, if we're talking about a love relationship, they just can't do it. They can't do it completely. They cannot do authentic love, although they can, just want to be around somebody who they think is special. Okay. So Tiny Face McGee says, why do we keep giving and giving? What part of recovery do we work on for this, as this is our problem? Is it low self-esteem? Actually, it may be low self-esteem, but that's typically inflicted after you get involved with a sociopath. I mean, there are people who say that, well, you have low self-esteem and that's why you got involved with a sociopath. Well, that may not be true. What may have happened is that you were just fine until you met the sociopath. And then it was after that you, because of the way they chip away at you all the time, that your self-esteem disappears. It goes away. So I don't want to blame anybody or say that anybody, has low self-esteem and that's why they get involved with a sociopath. That could very well not be the case, because quite honestly, since sociopaths want to take advantage of people, they want somebody with high self-esteem. What's the point of getting involved with somebody who has nothing to offer them, since their whole objective is to get something? So, but then the other thing to keep in mind is that part of what's probably going on is a trauma bond. And one of the signs that you're involved with a trauma bond is that you keep trying to convince the other person that, that they're wrong about you, and that they should love you, and that they should be around. And, this is one of the signs that you're involved with a trauma bond. And a trauma bond essentially means, you're attached to somebody who's bad for you, who is dangerous to you. And it's a very powerful bond, psychological bond that forms. So as far as recovery goes, what I would suggest is that you investigate that further. There's a book called The Betrayal Bond by Dr. Patrick Carnes, and this is what he talks about. He calls it a betrayal bond. It's essentially what it is a trauma bond, but Dr. Carnes uses the terminology betrayal bond to drive home the point that the whole reason you're feeling this is because somebody did this to you on purpose. They betrayed you, and that's what this is. But that's a really good book. You might want to take a look at it. It explains everything, how you get attached into these situations. And it also has checklists and questions to ask yourself. So it probably could be real helpful in helping you to identify what has happened and to see your way out of it. Okay, so Poop Dog Returns says, how do you know when someone is truly interested in you versus when they are conning you? Okay, there's 3 steps to protecting yourself from sociopaths. And if you're talking about someone who's conning you, you're dealing with a sociopath. The first is to know that they exist, which you do, because I've seen you at my videos commenting on numerous occasions. So you're definitely tuned in to the fact that they're out there. The second is to know the warning signs, and I would guess that you probably have a pretty good handle on that as well. If you want them all summarized in a nice little package, my book, Red Flags of Lovefraud, 10 Signs You're Dating a Sociopath, explains it all. The third and most important step is to trust your intuition, okay? Because your intuition will warn you if someone is dangerous, if someone is bad for you. Now, one of the problems is that if you have been involved with a sociopath, and now you're hyper vigilant and you're worried and you're wondering, about everybody's motivations, what you need to do is to work on your emotional recovery. It's because you're still not recovered that you feel like you can't trust yourself, and you feel like you can't recognize when someone is disordered. The more you can work on your emotional recovery and releasing the emotional trauma that you experienced, and to get it out of your system and to bring things into your system, do things that make you happy. So what you're doing is you're releasing the negative energy of the trauma and you're replacing it with positive energy of things that bring you joy. The more you can do that, the more your inner balance starts to shift. And you become less hypervigilant, because the whole point of being able to hear your intuition and to hear, when your instincts and your body is telling you that something's wrong, you need to be able to notice a real warning as opposed to your worries. What about this? What about this? What about this? What is this person doing? If you're always that intense and you get an actual warning, you're not going to be able to hear it because you're always so worried. So that's why it's important to work on your recovery so that you can calm down and actually hear your intuition when you do get a real warning. Now, you also need to recognize that there are millions of these people out there, and they're really good, and you might not pick it up right away. Sometimes they can fool you for a little while. They have good social skills. They can be appealing. They can be charming. The point is, the objective is to get out of a situation before a lot of damage is done. So if you meet somebody and you date for a few weeks and then you start seeing the red signs, don't beat yourself up, because when the signs were there, you saw them. So, that will be good. That's progress. And sometimes, especially if it's recently that you've been involved in a situation, sometimes the universe sends you a test, a quiz, and say, okay, can you pick this one out? So as long as you get out of it, before you lose yourself or or all your money or your house or something like that, then you're doing good. And the more you can recover, the more you'll be able to spot them sooner than before any damage is done. Okay, so Alicia is saying that they were barely married a month. He was almost never home. He didn't want to use my first name, even a pet name, for years. So then Alicia says maybe he wanted kids. I think he did say once that men who are married with kids advance further in business. Oh, there you go. There's a clue what he may have been looking for. Okay. So Kindness says, the sociopath tried hard to love bomb me, but this information I was able to see through his game. Great. I ghosted him over a month ago, and he still texts periodically. Well, that's typical sociopathic behavior. I mean, they like to keep all those hooks out, just to see if, somebody's going to bite again. So the key is to not respond. So you're not doing that. You ghosted him. You're not responding. Perfect. Just keep it like that. Do not fall off the wagon. Don't think that, after 6 months, well, he probably got the message, so now I can say hello. No. You've cut him off, no contact. You stay no contact. Oh, gosh. So now Alicia says when she got sick, he acted resentful, like I was trying to derail his career. He constantly makes me feel guilty for having to get infusions. That's all not a good sign. So I would suggest you keep doing your research about these disorders and recognize that if your husband does have a disorder, it's not going to change. I mean, what you see at this point is what you get. So if you don't like what you're seeing, you have a decision to make. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Lots of good questions today. I appreciate it. So in 2 weeks, I'll see you for the next episode of Lovefraud Live. Thank you. Good night.